read Daughters of Sparta, and this is why I think you should, or not, read it too. Hello and welcome to my video. My name is Mont and I am really happy to have you here. As I said in the intro and in the title, I read Daughters of Sparta, and here I will be reviewing it and pointing out some parts that I find interesting about the book. Though I almost warned you before starting that this review will contain various spoilers, and I will be posting a totally spoiler-free review on my Instagram. You can find the link below. And without anything more to add, let's start with this. Daughters of Sparta is a Greek mythology retelling that tells us the story about Helen and Clytemnestra, the princesses of Sparta, from how it was growing up for them to the Trojan War and afterwards. We also get to see their love lives, of course. On one hand, we have Nestra. We are gonna call her that for the sake of my tongue. She is the heiress to the throne of Sparta, so she was raised to be so. But on the other hand, we have Helen, that was just raised to be there, to be a princess. As the years go by, it's time now for Nestra to get married, and this is when we get to see the biggest plot twist, at least for me, on the book. Helen is a bastard child. Some men the Queen Lyra, and that's how she became pregnant of Helen. Of course, she is really traumatized by it, but the rumors spread all across Greece about Helen being a bastard. And that's when the king decided to change the roles, to reverse them, making Helen the heiress to the throne and Clytemnestra just a princess. That's when I want to introduce one of my first points, and is their parents and their role. Let's start with King Tyrandeus. In the start, he's presented as a really strict king, but throughout the whole plot we get to see that he's actually really loving and cares about his girls and his wife. Actually, he cares more about their happiness than making business with some princess. So that's really important, and I think that's a really great point, because we get to see that great men, good men exist even back then. It's just they were raised to be the way they were raised to be. And of course, this was a whole point, because with this, again, he decides to change the roles in order to get a good marriage for Helen. So I think it's a good idea, because it did affected Clytemnestra's growth, but it also affected Helen's. And I think, of course, for a father, I would think that this is a really hard decision, because again, Clytemnestra was raised to be the queen. But he made this decision to protect his kid. And I think that's very valuable, and we get to see different points of view for this. We also have Queen Lyra. Queen Lyra is a really complex character, because of course what happened to her, she gets really mad with Helen many times over such small things, and we get to see how complicated it was for her to be around something that came out of something so horrible, and she had to raise Helen, she had to birth her. So it is really complicated. She's a really complex character, and in my opinion it's really well done, because around Clytemnestra she is this loving woman, but with Helen is totally the opposite, and now she gets to live her whole life with Helen because she is now the queen. She gets to stay in Sparta. So is a really complex situation, and I think it's portrayed really good in the book. I can't believe I forgot to mention that in the most popular versions of this myth, Lyra is by Zeus, so Helen is Zeus's daughter. And this is really important in some versions, but in this book that's absolutely not the case, though it's addressed by saying that there are some rumors about Helen being Zeus's daughter. But again, that's not the case in this book. By the end of the book, Queen Lyra ends herself, and we never really get to know why. Many people think it's because she was ashamed of Helen for escaping with the Trojans, but we don't get her point of view, and I think that's fine. Sometimes we just don't know how to process things, or why things happen. So it was fine, and her character made me feel so sad. The book really helps you to understand her point of view, and you get to know why she does the things she does. Fast forward a bit, and now we get to know Menelaus and Agamemnon, the girls' husbands who happen to be brothers between themselves. Now, Helen has become a mother, the mother of her only child, Hermione. After giving birth, she experienced what we now know as postpartum depression. But of course, back then, this was just not a thing. And she went through a really hard birth, and it was just so bad that she didn't want to have anything to do with her kid. Again, this was really bad for the ages because the girls were just made to be sort of like a sidekick and also just to be a mother. So she started being like really bad mouthed by the people in the palace, and that's why she gets into even more depression. But she knows that she does not want any more children, and she actively starts avoiding Menelaus, but also starts avoiding getting pregnant by going for help from a witch. And now she's getting some remedies to not get pregnant, which of course it was such a big thing for the age. I want to introduce my next point, that it's the feminism in this book. For one of my classes, I made a small research, which ended up in a small theory I made all by my own, and this is what I like to call the Hamilton effect. Before starting, I need to state I love Hamilton with all my heart. This was literally my face watching Hamilton for the very first time, so this is nothing against the theater. As many of us know, the musical Hamilton came out a few years ago, and it became insanely popular amongst everyone. With that, it came a lot of misinformation and misinterpretation of historical facts. It was an immense spread of misinformation, and of course this is not Lin-Manuel Miranda's fault, but it's something that happened. For example, in the musical, we are told that there were only 3 Schuyler sisters, when in reality the Schuyler family was really broad. So, another example that I have to present that is way closer to what we're talking about here is the Song of Achilles. The Song of Achilles, a Greek mythology retelling about Achilles and Patroclus. It became really popular, and since then, many people interpret Patroclus as a baby girl twink that was in love with Achilles, and that was like his whole point. And again, this is not everyone, and this is not Madeline Miller's fault, but it's something that happened. And it is really big, and people just think that they know the myths by reading these retellings. So, this is something that happens now, but it is important to note the original work by Homer also went through a lot of translators, interpretations. We are totally free to interpret the myths how we want to, but the original texts are not the exact thing as they were originally. That means that this misinterpretation and this misinformation still happens today. With that, I just want to say that I get why we as Greek mythology lovers and as history lovers, I get why we are so defensive towards the Hamilton effect. But I think we're being way too harsh. Yeah, we see our favorite characters being misinterpreted one and over and over and over again, and it is of course frustrating. But we need to understand Greek mythology retellings, especially feminist ones, are something totally new age. It is just starting to polish itself, and feminist is not perfect. It was never perfect, and it will absolutely never be perfect. But that's the point of it. We as a society are not perfect. And I think it's beautiful that feminist Greek mythology retellings exist. We are reclaiming the girls' histories. The girls got taken away their voices and their lives, and now we get to give them back to them. So why are we being so harsh on that? I just don't get it. Feminist Greek mythology retellings are not only interesting, they are not only entertaining, they are important and they are necessary, because it is totally unacceptable that as a society we have allowed every single woman, at least one in their lives, to feel just as Helen, to feel as Clytemnestra. It's unforgivable. And we need to stop that. We cannot afford to continue like that. So if you're tired of these tropes and you're tired of these retellings and these narratives, suck it up, because it is important to a historical level. Even if it's not perfect, the book makes a lot of mistakes. Clytemnestra sometimes is just way too perfect, and on other parts, Helen is just way too much the victim in this situation. And yeah, of course, she was the victim of the war, of the Trojan War, but it is just her character made mistakes, and the fact that she does not addresses it is bad. But the books are allowed to not be perfect, and people are way too harsh on that. That's all I wanted to say, to be honest. I must add though, the story is not weak at all. We get to see why the characters are doing whatever they're doing. We really get to understand them. So it's not like I'm shitting on it. Absolutely not. This book is really good. I liked it a lot. And it's not like the authors fully rely on people understanding what happened in the Trojan War. But I need to point out that at least Helen has a really weak character development. From the start, she is a brat. She's absolutely a brat, and I do not blame her. She was raised to be this pretty princess. Of course, she was the prettiest woman alive, but she didn't stop. She just went on being this girl, and even after having a kid, I get that she was going through a really harsh time. She went through postpartum depression again, and she was trying to not have children, and she was at conflict during the whole plot because she didn't want any more children, and that's totally valid. But that does not justify being a fucking brat. She was a brat, and it is kind of annoying, but it makes sense. Like, Helen being a brat makes so much sense, and I like that. Like, the fact that she is not totally lovable makes sense. It's something that would happen. But what I don't understand is why giving her such a weak ending, such a weak character development. We get to see her in Troy, and I'm gonna talk about that later. We get to see her in Troy, and she makes friends with Cassandra, and we get to see her along with Andromache. But she only cares about what happened in general by the end. And yeah, she's worried during the whole plot, but she just goes back and forth with everything. She's so immature, dude. And again, it makes sense. But at the end, she's like, oh yeah, I am sorry about everything. Like, she just went from this point in her plot to this one in absolutely 5 seconds. It makes no sense. I do not like this ending. And also her relationship with Menelaus. Dude. During their relationship, it is stated multiple times that they were not in love, that they were just being the queen and king of Sparta. And that's totally okay for the ages. It's fine. They had a kid, and that was all they needed. But by the end of the book, we get to see Helen actually caring for Menelaus' life. And well, I understand that she maybe was like, okay, I am not in love with him, but I don't want him dead either. That's totally fine. It makes sense. But she's like, oh, maybe I do feel things for him. Why? No, the fuck you don't. And don't get me wrong, Menelaus is actually a really good character. I like him. He's nice. But they were not in love, and I think that's so forced by the end. And they talk, and their last scene in the book is actually so cute. They are such cuties. They're really good together, and I think I would have loved to see like something about them in the end. Like, watching them being a family together would have been so cool. But even with that, I cannot lie to myself and say that, oh yeah, they were so cute throughout the entire plot. No, the fuck were not. They were just not. No, yeah, Helen's character is just so weak, dude. Like, her ending is just so weak. And they wanted to paint like, oh yeah, they're in love now, and they just didn't know they were in love. No, that's not what happened with them. And we know it, but it's just so weak. And it made me kind of mad because they had such a big potential for their relationship. The build up could have been so perfect for them, but the end was just so weak. It went from being here to bam on the floor. So yeah, it's just no, dude, no. As I said before, we will get to see Helen in Troy, and to be honest, I love that part. I know I just basically shat over Helen, but this is a point I actually quite like a lot. So she is now in Paris's palace, living with Paris's family. She makes friends with Cassandra, and also gets to know Andromache, Hector, everyone, and it is insanely good. I've never thought about it. Helen was in Troy for 10 years, and at least in this version, she went willingly with Paris. So it is just insane to see the Trojans' point of view because to be honest, I am like Team Ricks totally because they are my favorite ones. My favorite heroes are Rick. So I never thought about the Trojans' point of view. And we get to see how the princes are fighting and how it gets so bad in the palace that they cannot sleep anymore because they are just hearing all the battles going on. And we get to see Andromache's ending that we all know what it is. If you don't know, I am not going to say it because it makes me sad. We get to see that point of view that I absolutely never thought about, that actually Helen was doing things while the others were at the war. She was waving, she was making friends, and she was trapped in a palace with a lot of people, and they were talking a language that she didn't quite understand and she didn't quite catch. So it was really hard for her, and I had absolutely never thought about it. So I'm really glad that this book gave me the opportunity to think about it because it's so interesting. And I personally think that now I'm gonna read more books about Troy because I absolutely never thought about it, and I am fascinated by this point of view. I believe Helen's character didn't get the character development that I would have wanted to. She didn't get to grow as I would have wanted to. But the book has that tendency because, again, Helen has a weak ending, and so does the whole book. So, going to Clytemnestra's side, before the war had started, Agamemnon sacrificed one of their daughters, Iphigenia. And of course, Nestra was totally against this idea. And she is insanely mad, to the point she made an oath to Hera that she would kill her husband if he dared to do that thing. And of course, he did, because Agamemnon is a shit. She immediately tries to get revenge, like right after it, but she was interrupted again and again and again. So she now needs to go back to Sparta, and she now gets to be the queen of Sparta all by her own. And this was really hard on her until a few years later we get to know Aegisthus. I hate these names, like, dude. 7 years into the war, we get to know Aegisthus, who happened to have a history with Agamemnon and Sparta and every single part of this palace. After winning her trust, they become sort of like business partners to reign all over Sparta, but they also start falling in love. And they are adorable, dude. Like, they are so cute. And this is exactly what Nestra deserves in her life. I am so happy for her about that. But they start plotting how to kill Agamemnon after Nestra told him that she made a note. So they start plotting this, and as she's talking about this, she starts having doubts. And in the start, there are doubts like, okay, I have children with this man. Are my children gonna forgive me one day for killing their father, because of course they are gonna know is gonna be so obvious. But also, what if I don't kill him? What if I don't make it? What is gonna happen? Again, she has kids. She wants to protect her children. That's what she wants to do. That's her whole point at this point. So yeah, she started having doubts, and I think, like, of course, after 10 years, the rate just starts going down, and that's absolutely valid. But she totally breaks the character, like 100%, because at a point she starts saying, no, maybe I don't need to do this. She starts backing up so hard, because she's like, oh, maybe I can be loyal to my husband again, and I can hide Aegisthus in whatever, and I can have this kid and pretend is Agamemnon's, and oh, by the way, she's pregnant. She goes, maybe I can be loyal to my husband again. Maybe I can be the queen, and there will be absolutely no consequences. And she goes on and on and on, and it's like, dude, Clytemnestra's point in mythology, in like the original books, is that she is absolutely enraged by Agamemnon killing her kid, because Iphigenia was fucking 11, dude. 11, 12, depending on the version, but she is normally 11. She's 11. And she was killed. And also, they were told that she was going to be wed. She was going to be married at 11. So, yeah, she's enraged. Absolutely. The ending of Clytemnestra's arc is so weak. Even if she does kill him, and she does not regret anything, I just think that that small point, that her being doubtful, makes absolutely so much sense. All the sense in the world. Of course, because she was about to lose everything in her mind, right? And of course, as it worked back then, she was about to lose everything, because a woman is just nothing without a husband. She was about to lose everything. But actually doubting about doing it and saying, I can go back with this man. Dude, she killed your child. It just, I don't know, I didn't like that part. It made me so mad, because again, Clytemnestra is totally insane in the myths. If you want to keep a part of a character where she is really witty, she's really smart, she's really intelligent, and she gets to reign on Sparta for 10 years alone. She had been a queen for 7 years alone without this dude. Why are you making it like, why do you want to just take one part of the character and totally discard the other? For me, it makes absolutely no sense, and it makes me so mad, as you can see. So, thank you so much for listening to my japping. I know it was really intense in certain parts, but I am really happy if you get to see this part. So, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to follow me on my socials and subscribe if you'd like this review. Thank you so much.